In the corridors of ambition and friendship, betrayal sometimes lurks where it's least expected. This is the chilling tale of Saanvi, a bright, ambitious young girl with dreams as big as her heart. But behind the smiles and the bonds of friendship lay dark secrets that would shatter her world. Saanvi was a vibrant, determined 11th grade student, full of life and hope for the future. Her world revolved around her dreams of becoming a doctor, a goal that fueled her every effort. Her days were filled with the same routine: school, then coaching classes, all in pursuit of her dream. In this journey, Saanvi wasn't alone. By her side was Kiara, her friend and confidant. The two had been through thick and thin, sharing classrooms, study sessions, and the same ambitious dreams. They pushed each other to reach new heights, shared secrets, and whispered plans of a brighter future. But beneath this friendship, hidden in shadows, resentment simmered. Kiara secretly harbored feelings for Amit, a boy from their coaching class, and a fellow medical aspirant who had also captured Saanvi's heart. Amit and Saanvi's budding romance brought them even closer, their shared dreams only making them more inseparable. To Kiara, the sight of them together was a constant reminder of her unfulfilled desires. Every smile they shared, every laugh, fed her jealousy, a jealousy that would slowly turn into a dark obsession. Unknown to Saanvi, her friend's envy grew, twisting into something sinister. Adding fuel to this silent fury was Dhruva, a boy who had confessed his feelings to Saanvi months earlier and had been crushed by her gentle rejection. Together, Kiara and Dhruva's shared resentment would lead them down a path that no one could have predicted, a path that would end in betrayal, terror, and unimaginable cruelty. One afternoon, right after school, Kiara persuaded Saanvi to join her for a quick meeting with her new boyfriend. Saanvi hesitated, considering calling her parents from the nearby shop to let them know, but Kiara brushed it off, urging her to come along just for a bit. She assured Saanvi it would be quick. She'd be home by 4:30. Trusting her friend, Saanvi decided to go along, completely unaware that this small choice would lead her into darkness she could never have imagined. She insisted it would be quick, promising it was just at a nearby spot. But as the clock ticked past 5, Saanvi still hadn't returned. Her parents exchanged worried glances, reassuring themselves that she'd be home any minute. But as more minutes passed and the shadows grew longer, their concern deepened. Unable to shake a growing sense of dread, they began calling her friends and classmates, hoping someone had seen her after school. With each call, the worry mounted, as every friend gave the same answer. No one had seen her since she left that afternoon. As night crept in, and there was still no sign of Saanvi, her parents' hearts filled with a silent, gripping fear. They rushed to the local police station, filing a missing person report in desperation. Saanvi's name and face quickly became the focus of an intensive search. The police worked tirelessly, circulating her photo, questioning her friends, classmates, and teachers. But in the quiet of the night, as the search intensified, a haunting question lingered. Where had Saanvi gone, and would she ever come home? After relentless days of searching by the police, not a single lead had surfaced. Desperation hung in the air as days slipped by without any news. When police checked the CCTV footage near her school, it was just like Kiara had mentioned during questioning. It captured a glimpse of Saanvi and Kiara walking together right after school. When questioned again, Kiara confidently stated, "Saanvi left for home after that. I came straight to my house." Her calmness puzzled investigators, but nothing seemed out of place. The police extended their questioning to Saanvi's other friends from her coaching center, including Amit, who had been close to her, hoping someone might have noticed anything unusual. But despite their efforts, every lead seemed to end in silence, leaving Saanvi's whereabouts a haunting mystery. The police began to suspect kidnapping, But with no ransom calls or demands, the theory felt hollow. Every lead they followed seemed to vanish into thin air, and every avenue turned up nothing. The case was shrouded in a maddening fog of uncertainty, leaving everyone involved restless and frustrated. For Saanvi's parents, this silence was unbearable. Each passing day without a word weighed heavily on them, and the worry in their eyes deepened, shared by her two younger brothers who couldn't understand why their sister hadn't come home. All they had were questions, and an aching hope that she would somehow, someday, walk back through that door. After 2 agonizing weeks with no sign of Saanvi and all hope nearly gone, her family clung to the faintest sliver of belief that she might somehow come back to them. Then, one evening, a truck driver arrived at their door, looking somber and deeply concerned. He told them he'd found a girl while driving along a deserted stretch of highway. He described the haunting scene. Saanvi had been lying on the roadside, her small figure barely visible, bruised, battered, and seemingly lifeless. When he approached, Saanvi opened her eyes slightly, her voice barely a whisper as she begged him to take her home. She could barely speak, but in that hoarse, broken tone, he heard enough to understand she was desperate to be with her family. The driver hadn't wasted a second, carefully lifting her into his truck, where she drifted in and out of consciousness, each jolt of the road a painful reminder of what she'd endured. He immediately alerted the police and hurried to take Saanvi to the address she had given him. As he shared his story, Saanvi's parents rushed out, unable to contain their horror as they took in her shattered state. Her clothes were torn, her skin was mottled with bruises and cuts, and her face bore an expression of deep, unshakable trauma. Fever raged through her weakened body, leaving her barely conscious and unable to string together a sentence. Without delay, they took her to the hospital, where doctors immediately admitted her to the ICU. The examination revealed the horrific reality of what Saanvi had suffered. Her body was covered with wounds, both fresh and healing, signaling days of abuse. She had clearly been starved, bearing the unmistakable signs of malnutrition, and her bruised skin told the tale of relentless torment. The doctors confirmed their worst fears. Saanvi had endured prolonged physical and sexual assault, and her frail state spoke to the torture she had suffered. The revelations shattered her family, each detail like a fresh wound as they awaited justice for the unimaginable horrors their daughter had faced. With Saanvi still in critical condition and unable to provide any answers, the police turned back to the beginning, revisiting everyone who had last been in contact with her. This time, their questions were sharper, their scrutiny more intense. They spoke to her friends again, focusing on Kiara and Dhruva, both of whom displayed an odd tension upon hearing Saanvi was in the hospital. The police noted their reactions carefully, particularly how Kiara seemed evasive and how Dhruva appeared shaken. As the days passed and the investigation deepened, the detectives began piecing together subtle clues that pointed toward Dhruva. Friends and classmates recounted how Dhruva had been drawn to Saanvi, his interest clear to everyone around them. Some even described the hurt and anger in his eyes when Saanvi had turned him down a few months prior. His once friendly demeanor had shifted, and he had grown visibly upset whenever he saw her with Amit, a boy she had been spending more time with. The police now had more than a hunch. With few new leads, they intensified their surveillance on Dhruva, piecing together a profile that hinted at deeper motives and connections that might finally unlock the mystery of what happened to Saanvi. 2 weeks after her return, Saanvi stirred back to consciousness, her memories fragmented but vivid in horror. Her voice was faint, her body weak, yet she managed to utter a single name: Amit, her boyfriend. This mention initially puzzled the police, but it provided the first real clue since her return. Under careful questioning, Amit hesitantly admitted that Dhruva had confided in him before Saanvi's disappearance, voicing bitter resentment over her rejection and anger over her closeness with Amit. Amit had dismissed Dhruva's resentment as little more than harmless frustration. brushing off his friend's words as fleeting anger. To Amit, Dhruva's remarks seemed like mere venting, a friend processing rejection in his own way. But as the investigation unfolded, the police started piecing together a more sinister picture. It became clear that Dhruv's anger hadn't dissipated. Instead, it had simmered beneath the surface, hidden from the casual eyes of friends who thought they knew him. In retrospect, Amit's trust in Dhruva and the assumption that his words were harmless weighed heavily on him. He'd never have suspected that resentment would grow into something dark and dangerous, shattering their bonds and leaving Saanvi to face unimaginable horror. With Dhruva now a person of interest, the police brought him in for questioning. Dhruva denied any involvement, maintaining a calm, practiced innocence. Yet, determined investigators left no stone unturned. The police, noticing inconsistencies in Kiara's statements and her nervous demeanor, decided to press harder. When questioned directly about her last interactions with Saanvi, Kiara's usual confident facade began to crack. The intensity of the investigation and the weight of guilt became too much, and under relentless questioning, she finally broke down. With tears streaming down her face, Kiara revealed the chilling details of that fateful day. Driven by his wounded pride and anger over Saanvi's rejection, Dhruva had approached Kiara with a dark proposal. Kiara, secretly harboring jealousy and resentment toward Saanvi over Amit's affections, had felt a surge of vindictive satisfaction. Dhruva's plan offered her a twisted opportunity for revenge. Kiara set the stage, knowing full well what awaited Saanvi at the secluded location. As Kiara recounted the events, the police listened, horrified by the betrayal from someone Saanvi had trusted as a friend. It was Kiara who had insisted they meet right after school. It was Kiara who had convinced her to follow without question. And when they reached the spot, it was Kiara who had left her there, knowing Dhruva and his accomplices lay in wait. Through her sobs, Kiara confessed that as far as she knew, Dhruva had planned only to embarrass Saanvi in front of his friends, hoping to make her feel humiliated for rejecting him. The idea was to scare her a little, tease her, and make her feel vulnerable, but nothing beyond that. Kiara admitted she'd thought it was just a childish, spiteful prank, driven by Dhruva's bruised ego. However, the horror in her eyes was unmistakable as she recounted how the situation took a dark and unexpected turn. She hadn't anticipated that Dhruva and his friends had something far more sinister in mind. As she shared these details, the police saw the remorse on her face, but also understood the danger of her choices. Her part in luring Saanvi into that terrifying scenario, even unknowingly, was still critical to uncovering the full truth. With Kiara's testimony tightening the case, the police brought Dhruva in for questioning, determined to unravel the full truth. Faced with mounting evidence and relentless questioning, he was left with no choice but to confess. Dhruva admitted, his voice faltering, that his hurt pride had fueled a desire to retaliate against Saanvi after she rejected his advances. He'd orchestrated what he initially claimed was meant to be a prank, using Kiara to lure Saanvi to the isolated location. Dhruva explained that his original plan was only to humiliate Saanvi, a twisted attempt to soothe his bruised ego. However, the older boys who joined him had other intentions. Everything escalated so quickly, Dhruva claimed, that he felt pressured to go along, fearing what might happen if he intervened. Alongside his accomplices, he kidnapped Saanvi, bundling her into a van. They drove her to an abandoned farmhouse owned by one of the boys, a place tucked far enough from prying eyes and typically left empty. Over the next few days, boys subjected Saanvi to relentless torment, leaving her in an environment of sheer terror. Her bare necessities, food, water, and any semblance of comfort, were rationed to almost nothing. Boys took advantage of her weakened state, each act piling onto her suffering. Any thought of escape was futile. They had taken every precaution to keep her trapped, isolated, and utterly helpless. By the time Dhruva and his friends were done, Saanvi was on the brink of collapse. When her weakened body could no longer bear the abuse, they assumed she was dead and callously dumped her on a roadside, confident no one would discover the truth. With Dhruva's confession recorded, the police had the chilling confirmation they needed. They now had the full picture of Saanvi's ordeal and the disturbing depths of betrayal from those she once trusted as friends. The police conducted a search of the farmhouse. They found personal belongings of Saanvi, remnants of sedatives, and horrifying evidence that corroborated her abuse. Forensic evidence from the farmhouse and DNA samples linked multiple men to the crime. The truck driver's testimony, along with Saanvi's final statement, completed the case. Dhruva, Kiara, and the other perpetrators were arrested and faced multiple charges, including abduction, assault, and attempted murder. Saanvi's life, once filled with dreams and laughter, now felt like a shadow of what it had been. The traumatic ordeal had left deep scars on her heart and mind, wounds that time alone might never fully heal. Yet despite the anguish, Saanvi fought each day to reclaim a sense of normalcy, her spirit determined not to be defined by the cruelty she endured. Her days were a painful journey of rebuilding, facing the memories that haunted her in silence, but with each step, she was finding strength to move forward. Sometimes betrayal comes from the closest of friends, and trust is a fragile bond. In this case, the jealousy and obsession of those closest to Saanvi led her into darkness. But as this story reminds us, justice, however delayed, prevails. Let us hope that Saanvi's strength inspires others to stand up, speak out, and seek justice. If you want to hear more gripping tales like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. If you'd like us to cover impactful crime stories that could shed light on important cases and help make a difference, please feel free to email us or leave a comment below. Like to support the channel further and help us create even more in-depth content? Consider donating through the link in the description.